Nobody saw it coming from Honda, not the analysts, not Tesla, not the dozens of EV startups that spent the last decade convincing the world that batteries were the only answer, and certainly not the governments that had already started writing the obituary for the combustion engine. While everyone else was racing toward the same finish line, Honda was in a quiet room somewhere building something different. No press conference, no countdown clock, no Elon-style theatrics. Just engineers, a problem, and a question that most of the industry had stopped asking. What about the people the EV revolution is leaving behind? That question, and what Honda did with it, is what this story is really about. But before we get to the engine, you need to understand something about Honda that most people gloss over. Because if you don't know where this company comes from, you won't understand why what they just did actually makes sense, and why it should make every EV company in the world slightly nervous. Japan, 1948. The country is in ruins, not metaphorically, literally bombed, broken, and rebuilding from nothing. Resources are scarce. Money is scarce. But people still need to move. They still need to get to work, feed their families, live their lives into that environment, walks Soichiro Honda, not a wealthy industrialist, not a trained engineer from a prestigious university. A man who, by most accounts, was unremarkable in school, but had one obsession: the sound of engines. He starts small, attaches surplus military engines to bicycles so ordinary people can afford to travel. It's not glamorous. It's not disruptive in the Silicon Valley sense of the word. It's just practical, deeply, stubbornly practical. That word practical is the thread that runs through everything Honda has ever done, and it's the same word that's now at the center of the biggest debate in the automotive world. Here's what most people don't realize about the EV era we're living in right now. The story we've been told is clean, simple, inevitable. Petrol is dying. Batteries are the future. Any company not sprinting toward full electrification is a company slowly writing its own death sentence. That's the narrative. And it's been repeated so many times by so many people that it started to feel like fact. But underneath that story, there are cracks, and they've been there the whole time. The battery in your average electric vehicle can account for more than half the total cost of the car. Half, and that battery doesn't last forever. After several years, capacity drops, range shrinks, and when it finally needs replacing, the bill can be so steep that owners face a genuinely difficult choice: replace it or scrap the car entirely. Then there's the infrastructure problem. In major cities, charging stations are becoming more common. But step outside those cities into smaller towns, rural areas, the vast majority of the developing world, and the picture changes fast. Range anxiety isn't a quirk of early adopters. It's the daily reality of anyone trying to use an EV where the grid isn't ready for it. And this is where the story starts to get uncomfortable. The metals inside, EV batteries, lithium, cobalt, nickel, don't come from clean, comfortable places. They come from deep mines, often in parts of the world where environmental protections are weak and labor conditions are worse. The car that arrives at your door emission-free began its life in something far less clean. Nobody talks about this at the auto show. Nobody puts it in the commercial, but Honda did something with it. Honda took that entire picture, not the curated version, and built an engine around it. The engine is called the e-HEV, and the first thing you need to understand about it is what it doesn't do. It doesn't power the wheels directly, not like a conventional engine. In Honda's system, the engine's primary job is to generate electricity. That electricity is what actually drives the car. The engine is working in the background, essentially acting as a highly efficient onboard power station, while the electric motor handles what the driver actually feels. What that means in practice is this: in the city, in traffic, in stop-and-go conditions, the car runs almost entirely on electricity, quiet, smooth. The engine barely exists as far as the driver is concerned, but here's where it gets interesting. Honda designed this engine to operate only at the point of maximum efficiency. In a conventional combustion engine, efficiency is constantly compromised. The engine speeds up, slows down, fights against traffic, wastes energy as heat and noise. Honda's engine doesn't do that. It runs at one steady optimal state, extracting maximum energy from minimum fuel. The waste that haunts traditional engines has been almost engineered out. On the open road, when sustained speed and power are needed, the engine and electric motor work together, seamlessly, without the driver doing anything. The system reads the conditions and responds. There's no mode to switch, no decision to make. It just works. And when the fuel runs out, you stop, you fill up, 2 minutes. You're back on the road, no charging station, no 45-minute wait, no mental calculation about whether you have enough range to make it home. That last part, as simple as it sounds, is the thing that changes everything. To understand why, you have to think about where most of the world's cars actually are. Not in San Francisco, not in Amsterdam, not in the cities where EV adoption looks like a smooth upward curve on a graph. Think about Indonesia, India, Nigeria, Colombia, countries with hundreds of millions of people, growing middle classes, and charging infrastructure that ranges from limited to none. Countries where a car isn't a lifestyle choice, it's a lifeline. Where reliability isn't a preference, it's a requirement. Honda sells roughly 18 to 20 million motorcycles and scooters every year, most of them in exactly these markets. Honda doesn't just understand these customers, Honda was built for these customers. They are the reason the company exists. And when Honda looked at those markets and asked honestly, is a full battery EV the right solution here? Right now, the answer was no. Not because the technology isn't impressive, it is, but because impressive and practical are not the same thing. What Honda built instead is an engine that works with the world as it is, not the world as it might be in 15 years. You don't need a new charging network. You don't need a stable high-capacity grid. You don't need to live within range of an E-friendly city. You need fuel, which is available almost everywhere on Earth. And you need a car that uses it with extraordinary intelligence. That is what Honda built, and the ripple effects of that decision are only beginning to be felt. Tesla's leadership has spent years building a narrative. The internal combustion engine is dead. Batteries are the future. Anyone who says otherwise is either in denial or in the pocket of the oil industry. It's a compelling story. It's also, increasingly, a fragile one, because Tesla's greatest vulnerability was never another EV company. It was never someone building a faster car or a cheaper battery. It was always the possibility that a credible, trusted, global automaker would stand up and say, clearly, calmly, with engineering to back it up, that there is another way. Honda just did that. The threat isn't that Honda's engine is better than a Tesla in a straight line. It's that Honda's engine gives millions of people a reason to pause before committing to an EV, and in a market that runs on momentum and narrative, hesitation is dangerous. BYD, the Chinese EV giant that has been moving aggressively into Asia, Africa, and Latin America, faces a similar problem. Those are precisely the markets where Honda's engine makes the most sense, where Honda's reputation is strongest, where the practical argument lands hardest. Honda isn't attacking EV companies on their home turf. It's quietly reclaiming territory that EVs never actually controlled. And then there's the battery business itself, the most profitable, most strategically important component in the entire EV ecosystem. Honda's engine runs on a small, smart battery, not the massive, expensive packs that EV companies have built entire supply chains around. If this approach gains scale, the economics of the battery industry start to shift. Demand softens. Margins compress. The investments that looked certain start to look like bets. Honda didn't out-EV the EV industry. It made EVs optional. And that is a far more dangerous thing to do. There's a larger question sitting at the center of all of this, one that Honda has been careful not to answer too loudly, but that its engineering makes unavoidable. Is an electric vehicle actually clean? On the road? Yes. No tailpipe emissions. That part is real. But a vehicle's environmental impact doesn't begin the moment you turn the key. It begins in the mine where the lithium is extracted. It runs through the factory where the battery is assembled. It passes through the power plant, often coal-fired, that generates the electricity used to charge it. And it doesn't end until the battery is safely disposed of, which the world currently has no reliable, scalable way to do. Honda's engine doesn't claim to be zero. It doesn't need to. What it claims is something more nuanced and, arguably, more honest. that a system producing less total harm across its entire life cycle can be more environmentally responsible than a system that looks clean at the point of use but carries hidden costs everywhere else. That argument won't win a bumper sticker contest, but it might win the next decade of policy debates. Governments around the world have been spending heavily to subsidize EV adoption. Those subsidies made sense as a way to accelerate a transition, but they were never designed to be permanent.